right, good morning, everybody. It is time for a Thursday morning, and the lovely Phumi Mashiko is here with us, which means we're going to have a good day. It's going to be a good day.
I just realized that you're in a bloody t-shirt, and I'm like in everything. I'm in the scarf, I'm in the puff, I'm in the everything. What's wrong with you?
You on Tuesday would have been the sensible one, and I would have been the stupid one. I mean, I could not warm up on Tuesday at all. It didn't matter what I did. So I came in this morning. I had a jacket in my car and everything, and I just thought, nah, what's wrong? All right, press the button. Okay, Ryan's in here, just making sure we know what we're doing. All right, so Phumi and I are here, and we're not cold or hot. We are both just dressed appropriately for ourselves, I suppose. You know what? I can handle all the heat in the world. Like, I believe while I was away, you guys had a heat wave going on.
It was wonderful.
Yeah, it was lovely. I love that. I have no problem with that at all. But turn up the cold, and I'm like, no, what's going on here? But I don't want to ever be in a place where Europe is warmer than us.
When?
Really? Yeah, especially in November, for heaven's
listen,
sake.
This week, but you know what it is? The thing that I think grates everyone's tits, or at least grates my tits.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, grates my tits.
Let's hear it. Yes.
Is the fact that my brain was over the winter, guy.
Yeah,
I've
exactly.
like switched that part of my brain off. I've packed the blankets away.
We had moved.
I packed all my stuff away. So on Tuesday night, when it was like minus whatever, I didn't have my onesie out. I didn't have my socks
Your
out.
onesie.
I didn't have. Hey, Magwetu. I was just like, hey, man. And
oh my God.
the books are back with their bloody load shedding. When they were gone, we had
blame
no
them.
load shedding.
Don't blame them. That we know who's to blame for that.
Mwah.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I thought they'd fixed it. I thought they'd fixed the load
Please.
shedding. I thought the box fixed
but-
the load
but
shedding.
this
They
just-
fixed everything
This
else.
just proves that they can switch it on and off when they really want to. They do have control of this thing, these idiots in government. They just do it on purpose to mess with us. Watch out, miraculously comes right before elections. Watch.
I don't think it will.
You don't think so?
No.
Okay, well, good. Because I want people to be reminded on it. Even
this, I think, makes people go.
Yeah. So already there are fights going on in the comments section.
Guys, it's 5 past 6.
I know. So much aggression. People are saying, did you forget Phumi? Gareth is white, says Mapelo. Sanele says, yo, Nina.
Nina.
Yeah, Nina.
Sanele.
Okay, sorry. And then Bakabanchi says, yo, Sanele. So much aggression. Right? So there's a lot of this stuff going on.
Man, you know what it is? It's the 2nd of November. It's that time of the year when we've all had enough. Our bandwidth, and it's just.
I agree, but we've got to remember that we still have.
Going, guys.
We have to still work this month. I mean, come on, we cannot just skive off for the rest of the year. We still have a whole month of work, and then 15 days at least of December that we still have to do.
Did you see the TikTok? There was a guy on Friday, I think. So Friday was useless day here. Useless day here in South Africa.
I'm sure.
All of us were so hopped up.
Of course.
About Saturday. It was just, I was useless. I don't want to lie. I was completely useless on Friday. And I kept thinking, this is the day the president should have given us as a day off. The day before. I was completely useless because it was the day before.
Or the Monday. He could have given us the Monday because everyone was hungover on Monday.
But it was the cricket. The weather was so amazing. I could have done with a bit of day drinking out on a patio, watching the cricket, waiting for the box, looking at the TikToks, getting. Right. I could have done with that on Friday.
Okay.
But
alas.
But this guy put up a TikTok going, guys, if the Boca win tomorrow, we must go straight to December 15. It's just.
Well, it's not that far away, hey? You're going to snap your fingers and it's going to be there already. So enjoy every minute of this summer. And November's such a beautiful month. It really is. Yeah. Come on. Let's keep working. We got shit to do, people to see, places to go. Right? So
Sanele, go and get your ginger tea.
Yeah, what's going on with Sanele this morning? Very angry.
He must go get his ginger tea and just calm yourself.
All right. So speaking of calming yourself, so my sister, she just knows this stuff irritates me. So I'm going to show you two things that she sent me. She knows
I
how
love
to.
it already.
Yeah. She knows how to piss me off like almost instantly, right? There are some things that I just find so appalling. So there are new Crocs, and I know how you love your Crocs. That's why I've specially saved this for this week. So look at this thing that they've brought out.
Oh God, I
What is
saw
this?
these.
What
I
do you even-
actually saw these.
what do you
It's
call it?
like an and a hybrid of Crocs.
So just tell me what it is. Like explain it to people who are not watching the YouTube, because most of our audience don't watch; they listen.
So it's
So explain what it
it's
looks
a Croc.
Yeah.
But it's got a sock that's like will cover
It's-
your ankle. It's
like
like
a
a
boot.
fuzzy,
Like a moon boot type Croc.
it's not moon boot type Croc, Baba. Not
It's so
moon
ugly.
boot type
It is
Croc.
just the ugliest thing.
I saw these in Washington and they actually
Please tell me you didn't buy a pair.
I did not. I did not because I don't think there's ever going to be a reason to wear them in South Africa. Tuesday was horrendously cold, but it never gets
It's almost
cold
like
enough.
It's like a
It
snow
never
boot.
gets cold
Yeah.
enough for this kind of
All
thing
right.
here.
So that's horrific. And then she
There's
sends
more,
she sends this to me.
but wait.
Look at this.
There's more. Yeah, this is terrible.
This is absolutely abominable.
This one's like a moccasin.
Okay, but it has a name.
Oh,
So here's the
gosh.
worst part about it. She told me about this. She says to me, "What the fuck is this?" My sister. So I go, "That is called a disgrace." She goes, "It's a low for loafer rock, a low rock, as in croc. So a loafer croc.
Wait.
It is horrific.
Yeah, this is
Horrific.
particularly bad, guys.
I had to look at this picture like 3 or 4 times to figure out what was actually going on. So it has the vent holes that Crocs are famous for, which I also think is just terrible design, because if you've ever worn like slops during wet weather, and we had a lot of wet weather in the last couple of days, then those holes are they're just there to get the water into your foot, right? Which is a horrible feeling. The minute your shoes are not protecting you from wet, that's at least 3/4 of the reason for shoes gone. And this one has that terrible strap at the back, which always makes me think of fat people for some reason, because I always imagine that the folds go
I'm
right
sorry,
over
I'm
the
no
strap.
longer listening to you talking about these awful shoes.
Why?
Because this coffee is so good.
I went and bought it for you. 35 Rand a coffee.
Listen, I'm
Is it
sorry,
worth
it's
it?
only gonna
Is it worth it though?
I actually had a little eye roll, like closed my eyes.
Was that good?
Inside my eyelids, my eyes like rolled up in ecstasy.
You know, if
And a little sigh.
if it's worth it, like this is a thing I'm doing for you. I don't know if you've noticed, it's turned into a 4-week in a row thing now. So I'm
Gareth,
doing this every week.
I have noticed and I appreciate you.
That's fine, Pums. You're the only one who gets it.
I
No one else does.
appreciate you. This is amazing.
But I mean, it's kind of a bit cheeky to do 70 Rand for 2 coffees. Don't you think?
Baba, we're going to be talking about the budget later, ne?
With Anthea. Anthea will be joining us from
I'm just
from France, no less. But she's watching the goings on in the what is this? The medium term budget.
medium-term budget statement.
Yeah, so we'll talk to her about that.
Listen, you're just earlier I was talking about grating my tits.
Mm.
Just gonna shudder your like.
Okay, yeah, we'll get to that. Don't worry.
So all I'm saying is, this is 35 Rand well spent.
Okay, well then that's great.
Well spent.
Sometimes when you pay for something, you get what you pay for, and in this case, I'm happy about that. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
It's like when I bought my apartment, which I'm just trying to sell. You have no idea how desperate I am to sell this place. I don't want to be a landlord anymore. I've got a tenant in there. It's not making me money, but it's just I don't want to have to worry about geysers or stoves or any of that shit. I just want to be rid of the property. I also don't think it's a particularly smart thing in this country to have more than one property.
Is your tenant bad?
No, she's great.
Okay.
She's great. I just don't want to be a landlord. I think it was a poor investment on my part. It hasn't improved in leaps and bounds, especially, look, it very quickly improved in value, like in the first 5 years, and then I'd paid it off, and then it was a worthwhile investment, right? But since then, it has not grown in value. In fact, it has declined because the property market's shit at the moment. It really is. I just want to sell this thing.
Just hang on a little bit
I
longer.
just want to sell it. But the reason I bring this up is because when I bought the place, Rena, who you know very well, my business partner and manager, says to me, "This is a nicer place." And I said to her, "Yeah, but it's more expensive." She says, You get what you pay for.
Yeah.
And that was one of the most important lessons I could have learned, because the place I ended up buying was worth more. It looked better. It was in a better place. It was all the things I needed, cost a whole lot more. Maybe I overextended a little bit, but in the end, it was worth it because you get what you pay for.
But it's still in a good
Same as with the
neighborhood.
coffee.
So here's the thing. Good neighborhood, hang on to it. If it's paid off,
Yeah.
and you've got a nice tenant who pays their rent on time and doesn't like irritate in any way.
But you know what it also
all you
is?
have to worry about is like the geyser
But
once every 5 years.
It's not just that. Also, municipal rates and taxes have gone up, and I don't charge her for those. So that's...
Why not?
Well, I don't think that was ever part of the deal.
Yeah,
so, and if I suddenly tell her she has to pay an extra $4,000 a month on rates and taxes, which is what it costs, she pays her water and electricity. That's a lot, right?
It is a lot.
So I'm looking at this going, why must I pay the city of Joburg? I don't live in the city of Joburg, and I'm paying them every month. 4,000 rand. Right? It's outrageous. So got to get out of this. I just want to get rid of it. Honestly. Just enough. I'm not investing. I'm divesting. Right. That's the...
Okay.
And frankly, who has extra money lying around? I would rather have this as useful capital than have it locked up in a property. I think that a lot of people feel that way at the moment. That's why it's a buyer's market, right? If you want to buy property right now, there's plenty to grab.
Now is the time.
Anyway. All right. So, first of all, this is interesting, and we're going to talk to her. Kala says, I haven't seen Kala in the comments for a while. Welcome back, Kala. G, did you see Jen Sue's post? Is she besties with your favorite expatriated British royal? Yeah, we spoke about it briefly the other day on the show, and we're going to get Jen Sue on because I want to talk to her again. It's been a long time, and we'll find out whether she really did bump into Meghan Markle or whether it was some sort of... Because Jen is very connected, right? So she knows people. She might have even gone out with her one night. I don't know. She's close to everybody. Jen Sue pitches up at an event. I was in New York a while ago, and she arrives there, and she's got like an A-list celebrity with her. And you go,
what are you doing?
How do you know these people? She's like, oh my God, Gareth, I've got these friends and they know people. And I'm like, okay. So she's very connected. All right. So Carl says, you idiot, Gareth. Rates and taxes for the account of the landlord. Okay, so I'm right. I'm not an idiot. Lights, water, refuse for tenants. So yeah, and I don't want to pay those rates and taxes. I do not want to give the government a single solitary cent. Let's talk about this on medium-term budget day, all right? Don't want to give them a single cent more than they should get. I do not want to be penalized for owning more than one property, because that's what they're doing. They're penalizing you. It's a tax on the rich, so to speak. So if you made an investment as a 20-year-old, which is what I did then, they want to punish you for that. So I'm now going to divest from that. I'm not going to enter their economy. I'm going to take that money out, and I'm not going back in. I will not be stupid enough to fall for this shit again. Right. So that's my take on this. Put it on auction. You don't have to accept the bid. Just get an idea what you could get for it. That's interesting. How does that even work? Do you know how that works?
Sort of. But I think that there might be
this thing's been on the market for 2 years, and I just want to sell it.
So, look, selling it on auction, because all the auction houses do it now. It's one of their new income streams. They probably had a consultant come in and tell them that. Anyway, I digress.
The banks also just want to flog stuff. No?
Yeah. And so they do all of the advertising around it. It's also cheaper than getting an estate agent. And then you just it's one day. You have like a day for viewings, I think, and then you have one day. All the people that might be interested come in and they bid on the property.
Maybe that's the way to do it. Thanks, Ruth. That could be quite useful. And then Dud says also, don't forget about capital gains tax. That's another one.
That's what I thought.
Again,
selling might be.
You get told when you're, and I shouldn't have listened to these people who were supposedly financial gurus. When I was in my 20s, they're like, no, you need to own property. Owning property is the way to first establish yourself on the property ladder. And when you're on the property ladder, you can borrow against that. It's all I've been doing for like 20 years. Anyway, so I bought this property, and now all it has done is cost me. It doesn't make me money. Like the rent I charge for this tenant it's below market value, I think. But if I put it up by another 2,000 rand, is she still going to be able to afford it? Because that's the question, right? And if she can't afford it, then I'm gonna have to find a new
Then you
tenant,
start again, and
that's a
then they might
nightmare.
be a crappy tenant.
and then you sit with a place that is costing you money every month.
You know how in
so
Hollywood they have like tours to past all these celebrity people's houses?
yeah.
Do you think your tenant has people like
Oh no,
my
please.
landlord?
No,
Yes,
they
Gareth.
don't care about that. Not at all. Doesn't help me
She
at
could
all.
she could make extra money maybe.
Well, then she should hand it over. All right. Let's get into the rest of it. There's plenty of news. I just want to quickly play something for you. I thought this
Somebody last week said, you remember you used to have the news you can use or lose.
Yes. You want that back?
Somebody wanted that back last week. They were like, hey, whatever happened to?
Yeah, we could do something about that. I'd be able to. Let me see what I can do here for you. But before we get to that, this is something that I'm just horrified. So I wanted to move away from Dr. Matthew because I'm over it now. I really am. I wasn't that interested in the first place, but we had a nice, interesting conversation about it with Dumi Morake on Tuesday because I wanted to know why people are so invested in this story. And it has to do with education. You can listen to Tuesday's show to hear the whole reasoning behind that. But here's this story, right? So this is a follow-on. So now the phony doctor threatens to sue the Gauteng Health Department for damaging his reputation. Now, you have to have some cojones to do this. The guy's just gotten off on basically impersonating a doctor, which we know is against the law. The NPA says everything is still very much in limbo. It's still under investigation. Not that the NPA are to be taken seriously.
I loved the fact, the chutzpah of his lawyer coming out to say, lying is not a crime.
Well, we've heard that before. Remember in Daweni Mahlangu?
Lying is not a crime, but
it's not.
But but fraud is.
Oh, but I don't think that this lawyer is particularly good. He might be a fraudulent lawyer for all we know. Anyway, they are now going to sue the Gauteng Health Department. And because the Gauteng Health Department is so incompetent, they'll probably win.
So fraud, okay. Maybe they don't want to go for the fraud. Maybe they feel it's a little heavy-handed. But listen here. Trespassing, which is what he was doing on multiple occasions. That should be like...
Well... I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. It drives me up the wall to think about this. And this Dr. Matthew is such a little Weasley. Like now I've been pulled into the story, and it just drives me crazy that I have to pay attention to this, but I can't help it. It's like looking at a train wreck.
So we're Cliff Central.
He's this weird little, like a hobbit of a person.
We're on radio, so we can talk about whatever we want.
Yes.
We can make fun of people. We can all of these things. I just cannot understand why Newsroom Africa, why a serious news editor, a news channel,
clickbait,
why they are spending time sending resources out there to talk to this guy. This guy's, what is the national importance?
There are no real journalists left.
I was just like,
none. There are no journalists left. So, all right, let's do something fun before we get to Anthea, because we're going to get into the budget just now. We have to know what's going on there so we can throw it into the Burning Platform later on and talk about that a little bit more. And we've got a great guest for the Burning Platform this morning who's also going to tell us about
Okay, so just one last thing about Dr. Matthew. I think he missed an opportunity there when he's like, oh, Dr. Matthew is my stage name or whatever it is. Yeah. He could have just told them. It's like Dr. Kumalo,
Yeah,
Dr. Kumalo, right. It's his name.
Yeah.
His name is, he's not
it's not my title. It's just part of my name. He's
Mr. Dr. Theophilus Kumalo. He could have said, I am Mr. Dr. Matthew.
There are enough people running around calling themselves professor. And they're not, right?
Don't get me started with that one.
I saw a thing yesterday in the news, because I knew we'd be talking about current affairs today. Normally I can avoid the news. About what a disaster UCT is and how everyone is fighting with everyone there.
The report. This is a report on an old...
And it's been going on for 4 years now?
The report came out, and I've just, when I got here bitching about how crazy my week has been, I have not read the report because it really only came out 2 days ago.
Right.
And I'm deeply interested in reading that report because, many things have come out about that. And since then, and there've been lots of other things, this council report,
But it seems to me that instead of not being in the news, which is kind of what you want universities to do, is not be in the news. And if they are for amazing students or great breakthroughs in research, or their reputation internationally increasing, and South African students being welcomed into comparative positions in other universities in India or in America or wherever. But none of those. We're in the news, like UNISA's in the news because they're under administration. And I saw Bladen Zimande is still our Minister of Higher Education. Who knew? I thought he'd been put out to pasture.
Listen,
how old must he be at the moment? If you look at his teeth, are they still in?
He put UNISA under administration like a week ago.
Yeah.
Maybe not a week ago. And that was taken to court.
Yeah.
And he was found to have acted unconstitutionally and against. I was like,
so what's happened is that just like everywhere else,
drunk with power,
but like with all the parastatals and everything, you've got politicians that have turned these places into arenas for vying for power. That's they are. Now our universities are reduced to this. Our state-owned enterprises are reduced to this. They are all facilities now for people to earn outrageous salaries and to politically strong-arm each other out of position. We've allowed politicians into every part of our country's machinations, all of our industries, all of corporate South Africa's. There are these political creatures in every boardroom now, making it impossible for people to do the business because political people are only interested in advancing themselves. There is no two ways about it. That is the truth in this country. So everything's undermined the whole time by these political actors whose chief concern is their own advancement at the expense always of the institution. So we no longer have people building institutions, growing them, making them more valuable, adding something to them, thinking exploratorily,
thinking bigger,
innovatively, bigger, any of that stuff. They're not doing that because instead people are like lining up at the trough and then elbowing each other out of the way at the trough. And that's why we have universities in the news about power struggles at the top. We have state-owned enterprises in the same position. We have government clearly in that position because that's always been the case for actual politics. And now, increasingly also, you see it at the top of private institutions. I mean, we can all remember very clearly when there was an issue around Trevor Manuel being on a board and trying to politically advance himself. Where is Maria Ramos now, out of interest?
Ooh.
Isn't she in London?
Is she? Doing what?
I'm not sure, but I believe she's still a major player in South Africa, even though she's, as I understand it, not even present at the moment. Anyway, I mean, that's besides the point.
So I'm looking.
I just thought of her because of Trevor Manuel. Because
first I was looking how old he is, Dr. Bladen Zimande, and he is a doctor.
Yeah. How old
65
is he?
years old. Eh?
Okay, well, he looks terrible for his age. I honestly thought he was 80 something.
This is what happens when you
been around so long.
When you are a hateful little man.
Yeah,
you age like milk.
Right. They take advantage of you and tell you that you're the problem. Well, that's exactly it. And Congo Chris is right here too. Universities become an adult creche that churns out inept invalids who can't even tie their own shoes. That's largely true, but let's not blame the students when what we're talking about here is how badly they run. I mean, we can go at the students later on because that's still a thing to talk about. But honestly, I'm despairing at the fact that there are all these venal people in important places in South Africa. And don't think that the private sector is too good for this. We've brought this up many times, and it becomes a big issue to me on a daily basis when I see the number of political appointments inside of companies. You see them appointing person X or Y because they're connected politically, or because they're a woman, or because they're this, or because they're that. It's all political. And then those people do not add value to the process. So products don't get cheaper. There's less research, innovation. There's no market understanding or market experience because these people are very often ideological. And then I put this picture up on Instagram and asked the question, like, this is part of what's wrong with the world today, is that real artists, creatives, visionaries, big thinkers are hard to find because we've replaced them all with accountants and bean counters and micromanagers and HR managers. Look at this. So I just spent time in Roman Greece. You know that. I looked at buildings, Pums, that they built 2,300 years ago, right? And the top is obviously a romanticized version of that. But you know, if you walk around the Acropolis, for heaven's sake, and you see what those buildings and what that little citadel would have looked like 2,000 years ago, and you imagine the quality of the art. I mean, there are statues there where you can see the veins in the arms.
Listen,
and it looks real.
Where the marble looks soft.
Oh my God, it's beautiful. Anyway, you look at that, and then you look at these modern sculptures that are up all around.
Ugh.
These fucking things made of iron or glass or chrome, and they don't represent anything. They're just crude and ugly shapes, twisted by minds that have lost the ability to be truly creative, and they're passed off as art. And look at what buildings you could see this even in, you know, in the skyscrapers that people put up that we claim to be, you know, expressions of modern creativity. They're not. They are cheap. They are built by accountants who are sitting with balance sheets looking at, if we compare the cost of this with the cost of that, why should we put nice architraves or beautiful facades and buildings?
Like, why this brick and not that?
Just use
this brick is
cheapest and plaster everything with concrete. Make it hideous as possible. The same goes for businesses. They are so busy cost cutting because the accountants are taken over everywhere. Nothing is left to being pretty. We don't have anything to be proud of. And this is not just in South Africa. This is all over the world.
Do you remember when I was telling you guys about McKinsey, the book that I was reading?
Tell me.
About McKinsey. Because crazy book about McKinsey and the history thereof and all of the places they've fucked up the world.
Yeah,
right?
They have.
Just when you think you can't hear anything worse about McKinsey, like it can't get worse. McKinsey was started in 1926, so it's almost a 100-year-old business, and because they are the kings of cost cutting, right?
So these are the people to blame.
They're the kings that
you want to blame somebody, blame them.
Cost consultants, and all sorts of things. But my goodness, John Oliver the other day did a whole, like, the show was about McKinsey and completely all of the stuff that they've completely stuffed up. And two worlds of mine collided because I was in a rabbit hole around McKinsey and all of the stuff that they've created and all, including barcodes. But and Purdue, remember, was the OxyContin thing. So where these two worlds collide is McKinsey was actually consulting to Purdue Pharma about registering OxyContin.
What a bunch of bastards.
Ped for children.
Yeah, I'm sure. No, I'm sure. They're satanic. There's no other way to put it. A friend of mine went online and found a CV of someone who I was at varsity with who worked for McKinsey. Who
now works at McKinsey.
No, used to. But listen to this. They worked there for 4 years, 9 months. Here's what they wrote on their LinkedIn, okay? Just listen to this. They were an associate from February 2013 to November 2014. So for a year and 10 months. It says, make pretty slides fast. That's their whole job. That's how they describe it, okay? So this is the cynicism of people who work there. Make pretty slides fast. Then they became an engagement manager. This is the kind of language they use in companies like that. That's why we now use it in all kinds of companies. Engagement manager. Can you imagine what bullshit that is? Anyway, they were there for a year and 8 months. So it only takes about a year and a couple of months. And this person is very, very stupid. So it must have taken a bit longer.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
So they're not like...
No, they don't hire this.
Because McKinsey prides themselves on hiring the best of the best.
They really don't. I know some people who worked at McKinsey. I've never been impressed with any of them bar one. Anyway, the engagement manager job, guess what they say is the job description there? Make other people make pretty slides fast. This is cynical, but this is honest to God. This is what's written.
So this one didn't drink the Kool-Aid.
No,
after 4 years.
I don't know, maybe after, because they left there in 2017. Okay. So then they became a partner. What do you think the job description is there?
Tell other people to make pretty slides fast.
Even worse, convince clients pretty slides will lead to real impact. This is what someone at the company wrote about what McKinsey does.
Oh my God.
So the truth is starting to come out, everybody, and we should stop believing that these consulting firms do anything for us.
Listen, if anyone is interested in the book, it's called about McKinsey. It's called When McKinsey Comes to Town. There's a very interesting chapter about South Africa and what McKinsey did here.
Oh, yes, we know they did because they're in all the state capture reports, all of them.
Eskom,
Crooks.
Transnet.
Crooks from top to bottom. Crooks.
So-
Those people who work there should all be in jail.
Listen, just when I thought,
Jail.
I really thought, after reading that book, I thought that must be the sound of McKinsey, like scraping, hitting the bottom of the barrel in my life.
They just kept on digging. They kept on digging.
I saw that John Oliver thing and I was just like, oh, God.
All right,
these
well,
people are evil.
Let's go from the frying pan into the fire, because now we sit with an economy that is absolutely devastatingly slow. So I saw our Minister of Finance, who really does look bewildered. That's the only way to describe him, right? Enoch Godongwana, he luckily took his hat off, which is a slight improvement because then he doesn't look quite so stupid. He's standing in Parliament. Well, not Parliament, because Parliament burnt down. There's a constant reminder, by the way, of the degradation of all of our institutions, is the fact that they have to meet in the City Hall of Cape Town because they've had their own building. The building that has stood, I mean, Verwoerd was murdered in that chamber. That's how long it's been there. And they've burnt that down. Anyway, they met in the City Hall of Cape Town to have the medium-term budget presented. This is where we find out what South Africa's finances look like. South Africa Inc. makes its shareholders report to the people of the country. We're all shareholders in it because we all pay the taxes that keep the wheels greased. We don't actually have a product at the moment. We don't deliver a service, but we still have income because we can force people at the barrel of a gun to pay their taxes. Now, what happens to those taxes? Well, that's where the Minister of Finance comes in. And to help us understand what that Minister of Finance is doing with all of our money, his ill-gotten gains, let's speak to Anthea Gardner.
Dude, I just want to tell you that the
Hello,
first building of Parliament, the first building, like it's many little buildings,
Yes,
1885 is when it was
Right.
completed.
1885, and it only took the ANC about 30 years to burn it down and fuck it up. Anyway, Anthea Gardner,
Hello, Anthea.
nice to see you.
Good morning, you two. You're in high spirits this morning. Considering yesterday's budget speech.
Yeah, let's just say we're animated. So I didn't watch the budget speech because I have no business understanding that stuff firsthand. That's why we bring you in, so you can make it a little more, let's say, easy to understand.
And I chose joy, so I watched the cricket.
Well done. Much better option. Yeah, unfortunately, it's my job. I did watch it. Yep.
I know,
and I watched it for you so that I could come and tell you. But I'm sure you've read some of the headlines, right? And the big headline is they're going to raise taxes. So just by the way, medium-term budget policy statement is not where they make big changes. It's the place where it's like the thermometer. They set the budget in February. They tell us what they've set. And then in October, usually November in this case, they just check what's going on and how things are going. And there seem to be a lot of headlines about raising taxes next year and that he's warning us. I don't think that that's what he said. I think that was misunderstood. What he has said is we need more money. Funny that. I've been back in this country for 10 years, and every single budget and medium budget, it's the same. We need more money. We're spending too much. We're not collecting enough, blah, blah, blah. I can't believe it. Are they ever going to turn this around? What I think he's saying is that they are going...
Go, Phumi.
I remember when Trevor Manuel used to announce a surplus in that budget.
Okay, I know, right? I know, where are the good old days?
I'm that old.
And you know, by the way, I heard you talking about accountants and all this kind of story. Trevor Manuel was not an accountant. He was an engineer, just for the record. Anyway, back to this tax story. I think what Godongwana is saying is that they are going to improve SARS's tax collection. They need more taxes does not translate into we're going to raise taxes. So if that makes you feel any better at all.
Well, it does help because I do think for the average South African, we look at the expenses part of the budget, which really is the more important part. What are governments spending that money on? But it's important also to know what's happening on the income side. And I don't think that government can afford to push taxes up anywhere because they will have a tax revolt.
Well, there's no
more
way.
money.
There is no way for them to ring
right.
out where
Yeah.
we have such high unemployment, where we have a stagnant economy, where businesses are not doing well, where all of those things means there is no way for them to go and ring out this money. I think last week, Tuesday, maybe Wednesday, everybody got the batch SMS. Anybody and everybody that's ever registered a company with the CIPC got the batch SMS saying, if you don't file your taxes within the next 10 days, we're going to be sending out summonses. This was Twitter went aflame with that because every single, for whatever reason, there's no communication between the CIPC and SARS. So even if your company's been dormant for 20 years, you got the SMS that says, we're coming after you for not filing your taxes.
Jesus, is that true, Anthea? That's outrageous.
It is outrageous. And in fact, the big tax collection or the big windfall we had last year was from company tax. It was commodities companies and from trade on commodities. The economy, the global economy was growing. There was demand for commodities. We're a commodity exporting country. And so we had this nice, things have changed this year though, right? So now it's a
also
headwind.
the commodity prices were good.
Exactly. And higher commodity prices for us means higher tax revenue collection. It was strange to see that personal income tax was higher and it was okay, it was on par. And then, of course, company tax wasn't that great. So I'm quite intrigued to see how they're going to turn it around. Kisveta has asked for more money to make SARS more efficient. And we'll talk about SOEs in a minute. But when you were talking about spending, here's a terrible story for you. For every 5 Rand collected in revenue, government spends 1 Rand to lenders. So we borrow money. We have a massive debt book, and we issue the government to raise money for infrastructure. Don't want to talk about that anymore. They issue bonds. People like myself, actually, we buy these bonds and then they pay us interest. And because we lend them money to build the country.
But Anthea, so one rand out of
that
1 rand.
rand.
Hang on. So 1 rand out of every 5 doesn't sound so terrible. Is that by global standards? I mean, if we look at other countries, does that put us in the worst category? Or, I mean, the average South African is probably in a worse personal finance position than owing 1 rand back on every 5 they get.
So our deficit is not that bad compared to emerging markets. I mean, if I say the number, it's crazy. It's 347 billion Rand of a deficit in the budget, right? That doesn't sound too bad compared to other emerging economies. But 20% of the revenue you collect, you're just paying debt. That's not right. That's not at all good. That's 20% of the money that should be going into fixing your roads, funding education, policing, healthcare, hospitals. The list goes on and on and on. And so actually it is terrible. And the minister made an absolute point. And it's interesting in an electioneering year that he would do this, to say that enough of the SOEs, we're done with you. Eskom, for example, we bailed you out. We're going to turn that bailout into a loan, which we were going to take equity. Now we're just going to make you pay that money back because you haven't met the terms of the bailout. You've not fixed anything. You've not done it right. Transnet, who by the way have got billions of rands in debt coming due in 4 days' time and again in February. Same story. You asked us for money. We're not going to give you a bailout. And unless you guys can do this in a way that is going to fix the logistics system, so that we're not going to throw more money like we did at Eskom, we're only going to give Transnet money if they've given us a plan on how to fix the logistics system in the entire country. This is not about high salaries or bonuses for staff or whatever else they may use that money for. So I think it was an interesting budget.
And what do you think about all of the places where they are cutting? education, universities, healthcare, all of the places. I mean, it's ludicrous. And when I look at it, in contrast with what we saw coming out of the census, just in terms of how those services have been degraded over the past 5 years and how more and more people have opted out of those services. What do you make of that?
I think it had to be an austerity budget. There was no choice. There's no money. And it's called, and let me think of what it's called now. There's a special name for it, the economic multiplier, they call it. So for every rand that government spends, only 15.5 cents goes to improving the economy. So quite frankly, when government is spending money, I don't mind if they stop spending. I understand that we're so afraid they're going to cut spending on the things that we need, the crucial things that we need. So,
well, I mean, Anthea, I don't know. I mean, to my mind, if you're going to cut back on education, it's probably a sensible thing. We're getting terrible results. For me, we're getting terrible results. We have the least literate, least numerate people on the continent coming out of our education system.
Do you think spending less is going to give you better results?
I think we could get rid of a few of these teachers who are shit. I really do.
Spending less doesn't give you better results. It just gets worse.
Well, then what? Do you say spend the same or spend more? I'd rather see cuts. This is where the accountants do come in handy.
Well, actually, so what you want is for this economic multiplier to improve. You want the spending to be more efficient, more expedient, much better. It's as if you're feeding this fat cow and it's not giving you milk.
That's what we are doing. Yeah, that's exactly right.
There you go. And so what you want to do is get a leaner, stronger, more efficient cow and who can produce milk without being fat.
Right.
That's a terrible analogy, but that's what it is.
No, it's probably exactly right. And because there's still a lot of people in South Africa who understand economics by, for example, livestock ownership. That's a very good metaphor for what we're looking at here. Just one last thing quickly. What do you think the next move by Treasury is? They only have so many available mechanisms and levers to be able to address these economic woes. Of course, we know for a fact that government can't create jobs. They only add to the expenditure. So what can they do? And how does the small business owner, the average worker in South Africa, a person who's trying to keep their own finances in order, how do they make sense of this? What could government do to alleviate the stresses and burdens of those people if they cared? For a moment, let's imagine they do.
Unfortunately, I don't think National Treasury makes policy, but I think it is about policy. It's about making business more efficient. It's about cutting corruption. It's about, unfortunately, you have to grow the economy and the jobs. And Godongwana gets this. And so the message was very clear yesterday. We need job creation, right? By the end of this year, he expects 14 million people to be unemployed. That is crazy. That's the rest of the country are working to put food on the table, are supporting these 14 million people. And so Godongwana has also extended the social grant, but really
we can't afford it.
To grow the economy. Yeah, absolutely.
No. I mean, we have to, but we can't. So again, I wonder what that number is. How many people that are not your responsibility, the average South African who is a taxpayer is paying for? I wonder what that number is at the moment. It was about 17 for every one of us who's in a job and earning money.
Correct. I also don't know, I'm afraid.
I think it's gone up. I think it's probably closer to 20 now.
No. For sure.
All right. Well, Anthea,
and I mean, I think it's important that understanding that policy is not made at Treasury, but also understanding that all of these things are an ecosystem. They don't work in silos, right? So the policies that are being made and in the various areas that Parliament is responsible for result in what Treasury has available to it to work with, right? So it's not the same like a household budget.
Well, it could be like a household budget if your wife was a gambling addict and she went and blew the whole of your household budget on one roulette spin.
exactly.
That's kind of what we're dealing with. All right. So thank you, Anthea. I'm sorry we don't have more time, but I know you're also busy and you have things to do. So if you want to find out what to do with your money, ask Anthea. You can find her at Cartesian Capital. We'll put all the details up. She is the woman who works hard for her money. So hard for it, honey. That's right. And you have to work so much harder now than ever before. Thank you, Anthea. Good to see you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. There we go. A little bit of an update from Anthea. She did the hard work of watching that horrible, boring budget speech. Now you don't have to. But I'll tell you what you do have to worry about is your penis size. Right, Phumi? Isn't that right?
I worry about my penis size all the time.
Well, let's talk about inflating stuff.
Yeah, let's talk about inflation, Dr. Mark. Look who's here, Phumi. It's Dr. Mark. And he is, of course, the T Health Clinic and the T Health Show. And Dr. Mark,
Dr. Mark is a real doctor.
He's a real doctor, unlike Dr. Matthew, right?
With the registration and everything.
Yeah.
And he still denies it.
I know. Doesn't it irritate you as someone who actually had to work for that?
Shit.
Yeah, drives you up the wall because you might have just come out of school and then pretended.
Oh, absolutely.
And you don't get charged by the
12
NPA.
years of my life I can have back.
12 years a slave. All right, so Dr. Mark, you teased this. I hate to make everything sound like innuendo in a discussion.
It's Dr. Mark just brings this out of all of us.
So last time you were on, you told us you were going to talk about penis enlargements because this is something clearly that South Africans are slightly more obsessed with than maybe we've ever been. There are all those. Listen,
you just have to be under a bridge. You just have to be stopped at a traffic light
That's
under
what I mean.
A bridge here on Grayston, and
you
you'll
see the
number of flyers that are talking about.
Right, exactly.
Well, you know what? I think let's try and establish what is average.
Okay.
You know what, Phumi, do you want to venture what the average erect penis size worldwide is?
Worldwide?
Worldwide.
Well, that's a lot of penises to average out. Like in centimeters, or can I just make a
yeah, centimeters.
I don't know. I have no idea.
What is it, Dr. Mark? What is the average
What
penis?
is it, Dr. Mark? Please tell us.
What is big? What is big? What is small? And what should you be satisfied
in centimeters? Because we are proper metric country here.
The average erect penis is 13.3 centimeters. So, you know what? It's actually much smaller than most men.
So why do we think?
No, that's more than 13.
So why do we think that we should have bigger penises than that if that's the average?
Gareth, come on, let's face it. If you're a boy or a man and you're walking around a locker room, you measure your
manhood,
cheesemo, at the size of your willy.
Yes.
Or will.
Yeah, this is, I'm glad you brought this up because this is a thing not a lot of men will admit willingly, but they know it instinctively. We're competitive on all levels, right? What car do you drive? How much money do you have? What kind of career do you have? What kind of wife, girlfriend do you have? All those things come into play. And whether men are actively aware of this and they go into a room trying to find out their place in the hierarchy.
Absolutely.
Penis size is an important part of this too.
Yeah.
Well, okay, but very seriously, on a serious note, does this happen all the way into, because I can imagine in high school when you're like at sports and spending.
No. This happens throughout your life.
All the time.
Oh, yes.
700-year-old men.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know what? The male ego is all about size. And
bigger,
to
stronger,
make
better.
you feel, I would say, confident, etc., etc. You know what? If you have a big penis, you're going to be one of the boys. It's quite obvious as I think you grow up. You know, but there's the guys that shower in the locker room, and then there's the one that dreads showering in the locker room, or that would shower with underpants or swimming trunks.
So let's just go back to this average thing because it seems to be causing consternation in the comments section. Dave says Africa tips the scale in favor of I suppose Africans, us, and that I don't know if that's a black or white thing. But then David says it's only the average because there's so many Chinese men. And
exactly,
is it true that they're smaller?
Yes.
Oh, really?
Your Asian,
their entire body is smaller.
Your Asian and Indian
This sounds like
population.
racism.
So Asian and Indian population are less well endowed.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Less well endowed. And that's why we're talking about the worldwide average.
Dr. Mark, is there a way to tell without seeing the penis whether a guy is big or small? Because
No.
Pumi's saying the shorter men have the smaller penises. Is that true?
No, shorter men can
And-
be tripods.
I never said they're short. I just said their entire body is smaller.
That's not any indication, though, Doctor.
No, no. Physical size.
There's no other
is not-
limb. There's
But-
no hand size or
No.
or foot size or distance between the eyes or any of that stuff that gives you any indication.
Not
Nothing.
as far as I know, anything that's been scientifically proven. But that brings us to one of the problems that we sit when we are doing some kind of penile augmentation is things need to be in balance. You know what? I often have guys that come in with a short penis and they want
Do
something.
they show it to you? Is that part of what the examiner?
You know
really?
what? You have to unfortunately see it. Sometimes you know what? You have to have a bit of a weed whacker to actually find it.
Okay.
So, but guys, when you come in, please just do some manscaping.
But we okay. So we spoke about the average size of an erect penis,
Of an
right.
erect penis.
and does it have a bearing just in terms of when they come into your office? They're obviously not erect.
So the
And-
average size of a flaccid penis for men, 8.8 centimeters.
Let me just think of what that is. I need to.
So-
I need to.
Now
actually
you
have a
need
look.
a ruler.
much.
Okay, that much. That's
Yeah.
really not very impressive. Okay, but so look, Doc. The point is also you get the grower shower thing, which is an interesting metric to use here too. That
Yeah.
you know, some guys are very much bigger when they're soft,
Erect.
and then as they
Yeah.
get harder, there's not much of a change. Or you get the opposite, where it's tiny,
Yes.
tiny, tiny, it becomes enormous. So, what kind of men? And I mean, because this isn't a metric that we can associate with any other physical characteristics, it's totally random by the sound of things. It doesn't necessarily, although you've mentioned there could be some geographical, ethnic, cultural, perhaps even racial disparities between these things. But what sort of men are presenting themselves for penis enlargements? Is there any kind of generalized characteristic to the kind of man who will come to you for penis augmentation, or are they again across the board and random?
In my experience, random, men across
Okay.
the board. You know
Alright.
what? If asked, 60% of men would say that they have an average size penis, and up to about 50% of men would say that they would like to have a bigger penis.
Okay.
And you know, again, this makes it difficult. There's only so much that you can do. Some of the procedures, the surgical procedures, can give you a slightly longer penis, but it doesn't do much to girth. They come with complications because it's a surgical procedure.
Yeah,
you can damage
so-
nerve tissue, so now you have a longer
Yeah.
penis, but
Yeah.
it's not a
And
functioning
So
penis.
this is what I want to ask you: Is it worth? Is the what do they always say? Is the bite worth the bark? I'm trying to think of what the right metaphor is here, but is it worth messing with it if you don't know that the result will necessarily create anything more than a cosmetic enhancement? It could potentially decrease the level of satisfaction that tool
And
gives.
how
Functioning.
successful? How successful
So,
are these kind
you know
of
what?
augmentation exercises?
The surgical procedures have fallen out of favor completely
Okay.
because they carry high risk.
Okay. So what else can
Um,
you do?
Now, today, hyaluronic acid fillers,
Well,
platelet-rich plasma, hyaluronic acid fillers, which the same
They
fillers
use that for
like
facials
the
and things.
BVL,
Ex-
like the same stuff they put in your eye.
exactly the same thing that we put in the face, we can put
Injections.
under the skin of the penis, giving you a lot of girth, or definitely extra girth. It creates weight, so the penis hangs a little bit lower. I do them in my practice.
Does it do anything to erectile dysfunctions?
It doesn't treat erectile dysfunction,
But it doesn't
if
harm it.
It doesn't harm.
And how often do you have to do this? If you
know what? It lasts about a year and a half to 2 years.
You need top ups.
Absolutely. And for some of the guys, when we do the first
Like
one,
all of these type of things.
they come and they want to do the second one. But again, you know what? This is a difficult. It's an
sorry.
easy
The metaphor I was
procedure.
looking for was the juice worth the squeeze. Thank you very much, Kapama.
It's a fairly easy procedure if you're comfortable with handling a cannula and a syringe. The problem that comes in with this thing is you working with a soft kind of gel that you have to spread equally over the penis so that it looks good in both the flaccid and in erect state.
So you need a sculptor.
So you know what? It's literally taking a gel and you injecting it onto a sheath under a soft condom, and you expect it to look aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah, because you don't want lumpy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, you know, the procedure is easy.
Jesus.
To get an aesthetically pleasing result is far more difficult. And then we have the regenerative therapies, and this is the one that I love, platelet-rich plasma therapy, because not only does it stimulate repair of tissue, so you have better, stronger erections like we use to treat erectile dysfunction, but you know, over time, you definitely have an increase in size. I have guys who I've done 6, 7, 8 of them with a increase of 2 centimeters in length and 2 to 3 centimeters in girth. So they're very happy.
Wow,
now that's permanent. Because it's a natural stimulation and regeneration.
Isn't it like the
tissue.
sangomas on those flyers?
No,
This is for real.
So, you know what? There are procedures that you can do that are safe and safer than others. Traditionally, men have been trying to get bigger penises all their lives.
All their lives.
So, you know what? You have the stretching devices and the vacuum devices.
None of those things work.
To a degree, but they cause damage. Remember, we have nerve endings, and if you pull too hard on that nerve, you're going to tear it.
Yeah.
The same happens with blood vessels, and the same happens with erectile tissue, your spongiosum. So, you know what? Instead of enhancing function, you might get bigger size, but with decreased erections. So, you know what? There are things that you can do, and in our program, a T-Health show a little bit later, we'll be going into detail about what is good, what's bad, what works, what doesn't work.
Well, this is the teaser, so to speak, for the T-Health show, which will be later on. You can check it all out on cliffcentral.com. That's why we have Dr. Mark here. Phumi, you look shocked and horrified.
I am horrified.
Why? Girls have been enhancing their boobs always, so why can't we feel more comfortable around?
I have been watching the BBL trend, and it is just as horrifying. It really is. And I suppose for a lot of reasons. And I'm also quite interested, Dr. Mark, if you can just talk to us a little bit about some of the negative side effects that people have to deal with on the other side.
Yeah, we got limited time, but maybe you can just indicate those. That's a good idea.
That is
negative effects of the treatment. Yeah, well, you know what? Let's just think surgical. If it's done incorrectly, instead of your penis, you know, it being horizontal or standing up, it's going to hang down because you cut the suspensory ligament. You can damage the nerves. You can damage blood vessels in that area, creating,
sounds way too risky. Way too risky.
You can do implants.
No, thank you.
Be
satisfied with that little penis.
But you know what? That becomes a little bit tricky. There's not a lot of neurosurgeons that do them. With the fillers, if you don't know what you do with a filler and you obstruct a blood vessel, you can cause, necrosis. Hemocrosis of a tissue. Hematoma is easy. It will go away. It's a little
hemocrosis, as in the death
necrosis, the tissue will die off.
Oh my God.
Then they have to chop it off.
Yes, absolutely.
And you are penisless.
Yes.
Too much risk.
with your stretching
Telling you.
devices and with your vacuum devices, you can create damage to nerves and blood vessels. Platelet-rich plasma, probably one of the safest, actually the safest
Okay.
way
I'm just
to do.
Doc, from what I'm hearing here, there are some minor improvements you can make.
Yes.
Forget about the fact that you're going to grow your penis by 5 centimeters. It's never going to happen.
No, but you can
Get over
grow
it.
girth by 5 centimeters. The problem is when it looks like
Doc,
a can with some kind of
Doc,
little hood
Doc,
on.
who wants it?
Doctor, stop
And
it.
who wants
You'd
to
be
take
surprised.
who
Gareth.
wants to take the risk for what? A little bit of rather go and work on your mental health.
I'm telling you,
Work
this
on your
is, it
confidence.
sounds like something that you need to
Body
do between
dysmorphia
the
is a real
ears.
thing.
Yes, it is a real thing.
But you know what? We
Oh.
can help as long as you go to a practitioner that actually knows what they are
My
doing.
God.
It can be a nice addition to your package.
Well, there we go. You want to hear
Sounds
more?
hectic.
You better listen to the T Health Show later on here on cliffcentral.com. It's live this morning with Dr. Mark. Thank you so much, Doc. Always nice to see you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Hectic.
Wow. Okay, so there we go. You've got it all this morning, and we aren't even finished with the show. There's still more to come.
We're
Stick
just
around.
halfway.
I know. We've got the burning platform next. Don't go anywhere.
Moving on, so scary things to happen to you whilst driving and what to do. So, have you ever experienced scary moments whilst you're driving? It doesn't have to be a ghost or anything, just generally, where you're like, "Oh my god, this could be."
Yeah, I mean, I think it happens to everybody. It's if you're driving and you're not paying too much attention, like but fortunately, I've never succumbed to anything. But a truck kind of a guy
like swaying towards you.
Yeah, just kind of like moving towards you. That's quite a scary thing.
No, for sure. For sure. I mean, I've spotlighted a few things. I've actually been in one of these scenarios now. Maybe I'll start with there. So, I don't know if you've ever hydroplaned before or driven over, like, I don't know, like sand or something and lost traction in your vehicle. Does that happen? Or water.
Yeah, it's called aquaplaning.
Yeah.
And it's happened to the best of us. With ABS brakes and traction control nowadays, it's a lot less. But back in the day, before traction control and ABS brakes, aquaplaning was a
serious problem.
It's a serious problem.
What do you do in that scenario? Because I mean, I can tell you my story afterwards, but what's the best case scenario?
The
when
best
you're in
thing
that
you can do if you begin aquaplaning is do not brake.
Yeah.
The worst thing you can do is touch the brake pedal.
Yeah.
Because what will happen, you will lose all traction. So even the little bit of traction you've got,
Better than not having any traction.
it's better than not having any traction. So do not touch the brake.
Yeah.
If you can think fast enough, accelerating is the best course of action out of an aquaplane.
Catch us every Monday at 9 a.m. on YouTube and on autotrader.co.za.
It's the decade that just won't go away, mainly because we won't let it. It's That 80s Show, the show that taste forgot. Every Friday, Paolo and Dory remember the 80s. Movies, music, fashion, Wham, Beachies, and the Hoff. If it was acceptable in the 80s, it will get you cancelled today. That 80s Show, new episode every Friday, live or as a podcast on cliffcentral.com.
Time for the burning platform, cliffcentral.com, Thursday morning. This is where we get to check out all the important stuff that's happened in the week. We get to catch up with the political goings on, and there are a lot of those. We have a new public protector. Did you see that?
Absolutely.
Very exciting. She's the one
And
who
in the-
Glenys Breitenbach accused of sleeping her way to the top.
That was such a devastatingly low point for Glenys.
I don't
She didn't
agree.
need it.
I don't agree. I think this is how the
no.
ANC works. It is an organization where you sleep your way to the top. It's happened for so
Listen,
many. Oh,
Glynis
please.
did not need that. She did not need to be
I don't
in
know.
that bandwagon. But
I don't know.
also,
This is
in
the
that
level of our
committee,
politics.
sitting next to Glynis Braytonbuck in the committee now
Hmm.
is going to be Faitam Kwebane.
Mm,
So next time,
exciting times.
next time the public protector, the new public protector, goes to account to Parliament,
Yeah,
to
there's
her
gonna be
standing committee,
Busisiwe
she's
there.
going to be talking to Busisiwe,
Fantastic.
others.
We're just not a serious country, are we? It's unbelievable. Speaking of not being a serious country, the Burning Platform is also where we get to interrogate a bunch of really, really important subjects. Now, occasionally we can get pulled into nonsense, and very often in this country we are distracted quite easily by nonsense. So our guest this morning is exactly the opposite, no-nonsense person. Ivor Chipkin is the co-founder and director of the New South Institute, the NSI. He was the founder and director of the Public Affairs Research Institute at the University of Witwatersrand and the University of Cape Town for 10 years before that. Back in 2017, Chipkin, along with several colleagues, wrote and released the Betrayal of the Promise report, which is a study of state capture that had an enormous political impact on South Africa. He's the author of Do South Africans Exist? A great question. I'm not sure we've answered that in the ensuing years. And Shadow State, the Politics of State Capture with Mark Swilling. So I welcome to the studio today Ivor Chipkin. Very good to see you, Ivor. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, lovely to be here. Thank you.
No,
We're
nice to have you
excited.
here. Are you excited? Are you excited? What's exciting? Are you excited
Well-
about the medium-term budget, Ivor? Tell us.
No, what I'm really excited about is having to follow a segment on penis size, where I'm thinking what we're going to talk about. How are we going to compete with that?
I
Yeah,
think what you are actually excited about, if you don't mind me bringing on something that you dropped into the conversation just before we started, is that you're off Twitter, which is primarily for your own sleeping patterns, your mental health. I think that's a very wise thing.
Yeah,
to
really,
do.
I've left it altogether. I just couldn't bear it anymore. You can't tell the difference between what is sensible and what is complete made up nonsense, and
we're
what
in
is what bots are.
We're in the post-truth era now. That's what they keep saying, right?
Yeah, and there's a constant sense, there's a constant stream of stuff. You think so the next thing might be important, be important. You're drawn, and I just couldn't sleep anymore. So I just cancelled. And I have to tell you something. My sleeping's improved, and I feel much better.
I'm delighted to hear it.
Thank you
Good.
very much.
We first always like to check in on our guests to
Thank
make
you.
sure.
So my sleeping's better, feeling much better.
Well,
There
we're
we are.
very happy
Thank
for
you
it.
so much.
So let's just talk quickly about what your day-to-day work is, and particularly the work that you've been involved in recently, which is doing real things on a policy level, which most of us imagine are only the province of politicians. So just explain a little bit of that to people so we can have some idea starting right off.
So the idea really is this: that South Africa, like all countries, face very, very major challenges, whether it's in the economy, whether it's in social services, whether it's in the organization of government itself.
I'm going to
which is a
resist
big area.
the temptation to be sarcastic. at this
No, don't
point.
be sarcastic. Be sarcastic. Huge challenges, and most countries, what they do is realizing that these are complex issues, difficult to solve. They have various kinds of enterprises, think tanks, universities, combinations of the two, which spend a lot of time trying to think about the modalities of how to solve these problems, but not academically, practically.
Yeah.
So you've got unemployment. How do you deal with those unemployments, and develop policies and proposals, and these then hopefully filter into the political debate, and parties then develop their approaches or their manifestos or their policies themselves based on the circulation of ideas. This is how it's supposed to work. And in South Africa, it was working like that in the 1990s. The presidency had a very effective and powerful policy unit under Joel Netshitenzhe.
I was going
which
to
was
say that
drawing on-
Lutuli House used to have some big
Really?
thinkers there.
The space was really dynamic. Robust debates, lots of fighting over economic policy, but over all sorts of things. The stuff that was coming out was some of it was good, some of it was bad, but nonetheless, it was a real contestation of ideas.
And there was public participation.
there
which is
really
crucial here
was.
too.
There really was. I mean, everyone,
Yeah.
it was kind of free for all, and there was lots of engagement.
At what stage is public participation most effective? Is it in the initial draft stages where people are asked to comment in the government gazette, for example, or is that already too late?
No, I think it's in this kind of space. It's a sense that the general level of public conversation takes on board quite the kind of the nuts and bolts questions of the day. It's not at this, so the conversation in the political conversation doesn't remain at this very high abstract level.
Yeah.
That we get that the general maturity of political conversation is to tackle the nuts and bolts, so that you can actually evaluate when you hear a politician sprouting what are kind of general proposals. You can ask the politician, yeah, great, sounds lovely, economic freedom for everybody, right? How are we going to do it? And are those proposals meaningful? Okay, so you're going to nationalize the
banks or the mines.
banks or the mines.
The land.
Okay, all this sort of stuff. Okay, but it's great, love it, let's do it. But let's see what are the institutions? Okay, who's going to own them? How they're going to be run? How they're going to be administered? Who's going to have the power to make the
do you feel there is a practical understanding of these things, or is so much of it still abstract and ideological?
So what happens is the 1990s, I think this is developing. It really is. And you see it in all sorts of areas. I mean, take policing, for example.
Yeah.
In the 1990s, after the transition, there's a very, very dynamic engagements around how to structure the police. Really, quite amazing stuff going on. The academic papers, their seminars, their conferences that include a whole variety of stakeholders, including the police themselves. And the stuff is working. I know there's a general suspicion in South Africa around academics and of policy wonks and stuff like that.
Quite rightly, because a lot of them have caused most of our problems.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
That's a
let's
very
come back to that.
legitimate-
I'm not
I think
sure I
it's
agree with you there.
It's fair
I think
too.
it's
These are the abstract thinkers. These are precisely the non-practical people you're talking about.
but it's because the conversation drifts away from the practical stuff. But in the early 1990s, take policing.
That's always going to happen when you bring theoreticians and academics into conversation. They're never going to be practical. Now, most of them have never earned a practical cent in their lives. They are tenured.
No, but and I hear what
Educated.
I was saying. I was saying that the conversation has to happen everywhere at all levels. So there may be people who are theoreticians, who are academics, who are driving a particular way of thinking about stuff. But at the same time, somewhere else, in another space, in another room, so when you have seminars, when you have conferences, when you have all of these kinds of things
But
happening,
most of it's just them.
somebody's got to think about it, Gareth.
But they're blowing smoke up each other's asses in many of these situations. And,
No.
the more theoretical they get, the more likely they also are to be on the extreme left or extreme right, because those are not practical thinking people.
But for as long as the rest of us, civic participation is then left only to those individuals, if the people like us who are affected on a day-to-day level are not part of any of these kinds of conversations, and I think when we started this particular train of thought was around the fact that public participation is a very important part of moving the thinking forward into a place of policy.
All right,
I would agree entirely with that. It's because what happens if you don't have this public? So what public participation does is it grounds those what you're calling abstract academic debates into the practical.
Sure.
Right. So yes. So have these abstract debates, the character of the political economy, walla, walla, walla. Okay, so what for the here and now? How does that mean for service delivery, for electricity? And we now realize more and more that allowing politicians and others to have these abstract debates behind closed doors has huge consequences for practical matters.
Oh, but Ivor, wasn't there a very cozy relationship in that world? Because these people, first of all, feel like they're the architects of the future, and the art of the possible, which Thabo Mbeki used to refer to all the time as being his main motivator. I mean, that could be in a benevolent world. Those could be very good things, but we know that the average South African also is completely apathetic to these things or ignorant of them. So the average South African doesn't know to participate.
That, Gareth,
right?
Is part of the reason why earlier in the last hour, when we were talking about cutting back on public spending in terms of education, I said to you, it is a fucking bad idea. Because how can we today have less educated, less informed citizens than when there was apartheid? How is it that in apartheid we were able to have people like a Wally Serote? We were able to create people like a Wally Serote, and today we are unable to do that because we keep cutting back on the budget of education.
Ivor, jump in here if you want to.
Then allowing idiots to become the minister and not engaging them about how these things work.
We know who's not to blame for our revolting education outcomes. We know who's not to blame for that. It's certainly not the students themselves. It's certainly not the taxpayers. And it's certainly not the parents. In this case, the educational institutions and the people who are proffering this education to the students and the people who administer that system are entirely to blame. No?
So, I mean, I think it's a complex field. What the answers are, I'm not quite sure.
We spend per capita more than any other country almost on education, and we get the worst results.
Look,
How?
One bit of research that I've read, which is shocking and will shock you as well, is that relative to the apartheid period, things are much better in education. So to give you a sense of just how that they're actually, bizarrely enough,
We must have been horrific.
I
before.
think we were horrific before. And I
Okay,
think,
but that's small comfort to the young person trying to get a job.
Sure. But I think you put your
to the 65% who don't make it through the education system.
So I think I think you put your finger on something very important. This is why that conversation about policy was spiraling off into the wrong direction. Because in the end, what it comes down to in many cases is administration. And this is a word that is very, very unpopular in South Africa. It's like, you say the word public administration and everyone yawns. Oh God, yawn. And yet so much of what goes wrong and goes right in some cases in South Africa, like the Springbok rugby victory, has got a lot to do with administration. Yes, it's the talent of the players, the genius of the coaching, etc. But ultimately, there's a machine underpinning it, which requires the training, the consistency, the allocation of resources, and all of that is around administration.
And actual people of merit.
Absolutely. Putting good people into the right positions and getting them to do in a structured manner. That is really what an institution is, and that is the area where we've absolutely failed in South Africa, to pay attention to institutions, to administration, and this is where I think public policy and all the stuff can, having good ideas is one thing, but embedding them in administrations is absolutely what is needed, and this is where South Africa's gone really, really wrong. But there's also, let me just finish on this point, this is where there's enormous hope for South Africa, because this is something that you can still do, and in this regard, I'm very optimistic, but bizarrely enough, there are very, very good things currently on the table.
Okay.
Some of them are in Parliament around taking ideas and embedding them in actual administrative changes. And this is what I'd like to talk about.
Let's talk about that, because I was going to say, how do we get better at that? Because I do agree with you. South Africa has some really good ideas, but we're really bad at implementation.
Well, I think at the root of all of this, there is that question of merit, because the ANC is directly, ideologically, and institutionally opposed to the idea of putting good people in good places, because it's a network of thieves and a catered deployment system.
Okay.
Right?
Ivor, you were saying.
No, but I mean, is that not at the heart of the problem?
But
you have bad administrators because they actually don't know what the hell they're doing.
I think it's it's an element of the problem. It's not the full extent of the problem, though. Is
it not the disease instead of a symptom?
Let Ivor finish. Let him finish his
trying
thoughts.
to understand.
So I think if you don't mind me saying, I think those are answers that are too quick to come. Those are ready at hand. Everyone's stupid and incompetent, and if we get rid of all the stupid and incompetent people, then everything will be running fine.
Well, don't rather ascribe it to incompetence than to malice.
No, not malice. I think there are a whole lot of quite complicated issues here, which can be resolved quite simply. Well,
right,
not simply, but they
Okay,
can be
so
resolved.
Let's talk about that.
So let me tell you one. And this is a mistake that many countries have made. This is the mistake of the US political system until the 1920s, until they changed the law in 1883, the Pendleton Act, but they only implemented them in the 20s. You've all heard of Tammany Hall politics.
No.
Tammany Hall politics was where, essentially the competition between the Republicans and the Democrats. When the Republicans won, they fired the whole civil service and they brought in their members. So the famous stories of the post office, 50,000 workers. If the Republicans won the election, they would fire all the 50,000 Democratic postal workers, and they'd bring in 50,000 Republican workers. And when the Democrats won the election, they would fire all the 50,000 Republican workers and bring in 50,000 Democrats.
It was
catered on steroids, across the states. Of course, this was dysfunctional for modernizing the states. And from the 1920s, they start implementing these reforms, which require, that the political parties don't have that kind of control. So this is the moment that we're at in South Africa. And I'll give you, this is the situation. So we've always had a highly politicized public administration. This is through the apartheid period. With the Broederbond to the back door. Ostensibly, we had a public service appointed on the grounds of merit, but actually there was the political back door through the Broederbond and a whole range of other mechanisms.
Sure.
The great tragedy of South Africa after 1994 is that we don't end those practices. We don't depoliticize the public administration. We don't professionalize it in that kind of way. We keep those practices going on, but we legalize them. We passed something called the Public Service Act of 1994. Have a look at it. I'm not making this up. Have a look at Section 3 of the Public Service Act. It's there in our books. It's not cadre deployment that's the problem. It's our foundational piece of legislation. What does the Public Service Act of 1994 say? Section 3. It gives the president and it gives ministers and MECs at provincial government powers over two fundamental things, quite incredible. Power to recruit public servants. So all recruitment is a political matter. And discretion over operational decisions in departments. Unbelievable. So that's not like cadre deployment. That's like politicians abusing their roles. That is what the law allows them to do. Some politicians realize that they don't have the competency to make those sorts of decisions, and they delegate it to their senior officials. But many politicians like that kind of power, and they interfere like mad in recruitment and in operational decisions, producing, which is one of the great misnomers of South African political language, what the NDP National Development Plan called the tensions in the political administrative interface. What does it really mean? That politicians were interfering in the work of director generals and heads of departments.
This is what Portia Darby says. My problem is the shareholder and ministerial interference.
So this is one of the key issues. It what allowed state capture to happen, because the minister and the president, in this case the president Zuma, at the end of the day, he could have make appointments in key positions. It wasn't that he was abusing his legal authority. He had that legal authority to make appointments of boards of state-owned enterprises, for example, or to change the Minister of Finance and to make decisions around senior staff. He had that power. So we've written that power into our law. What I've been saying is change the law. Get rid of the Public Service Act, or at least that section of the law. So here's what's really exciting, and this is why we sometimes have the wrong conversation. And Gareth, I'm going to point my finger at you in this regard.
Go on.
If we constantly go on around ineptitude and stupidity and corruption, etc., we obscure the fact that where the heart of the problem is. So the heart of the problem, we need a legislative change. We need to redo the Public Service Act, and then amazingly, there is quite progressive public servants in the Department of Public Service Administration. They're not all stupid and corrupt. Have developed a draft piece of legislation, a bill, which is in Parliament now. It's called the Public Service Amendment Act. Okay. Public Service Amendment Bill, sorry. And what does it do? It suggests changing the powers which politicians have over recruitment and over operational decisions.
But are the politicians ready to give up all that power?
So that is why this sort of space, the space that you've got, is so important. This is why we need to bring the public into these. Let them know about it. Let them get upset or excited about the possibility. Let them ask questions to political parties. Do you support the Public Service Amendment Bill? What are you doing in Parliament to support it or get it through? Let's start having this kind of conversation, not so that it's secluded amongst a couple of policy wonks behind closed doors. Let this become a general conversation, and this is why I'm very pleased to be here.
Well, that's also that's with all the love in the world. That's also why I came at it from this point of view. This is the popular opinion. And I must put these things to you so that you can also put it right in a public sphere where people can now hear it. And those ignorant people or those people who've chosen to be apathetic can now join in this conversation. So this is tremendous. What are the actual chances of this bill being passed into law?
So that's the big challenge. I'm skeptical that the ANC has, even though ostensibly this is something they should support, I'm not sure as a political party they are ready to give up this the kind of control that they currently exercise. I think they're quite addicted to it. So I'm not sure that they are going to they're going to push it through. This is where we've been working with opposition political parties across the board, because we don't want to make this an issue which is of a particular opposition party. We don't want to politicize in that way, but we want opposition parties to take this up in their manifestos. But this should be a public part of the public conversation. So I think if we build momentum, if we get ordinary people behind these changes, then I think there's some chance that political parties could potentially realize that if they don't support these issues, it potentially has electoral consequences either in 2024 or
But they don't
going
have
forward.
the numbers. Even if you got every single opposition
pie
party
in the sky
today that's in Parliament today behind these kind of amendments in the way that you want it, they just don't have the numbers to pass it through.
So I would share your skepticism
Thank you.
normally, but we've had a huge shift, and it's been happening since 2016. But it's really, it's really hit the.
Some water for you. Go for it.
Go for it.
You can take a breathing gap. We do have time.
Yeah,
You know, the nice thing about this show, Ivor, is we have lots of time. We can even go on after 8 if we feel like it. Ask Phumi. We've done it
Is this a
before.
way of very politely saying that I'm speaking too quickly?
No, we love it.
No, we love the way your pace is great.
And what you're speaking about passionately, which also, I mean, I don't know a lot of people who can speak passionately about policy or about bills that are waiting before Parliament. But really and truly, is it at all possible, you talked about the practical stuff just now, to get this passed with only opposition party support, and especially with most of the opposition parties signing on, but perhaps one or two not doing that, you critically lose any kind of opportunity to make a change.
Yeah, I don't think so. But, and this is I think this is key really, and this is something we have to watch. And this is why I think it's up to all of us to start having these conversations at home and amongst friends, and especially amongst in political circles. What's definitely been happening, and it's finally caught up with them, is the ANC has been losing electoral support on the basis of its performance in government. It started in 2016, but it's really the chickens have come to roost. Is that the
Come
idiom?
home to roost.
Come home to roost. So I'm not very good with idioms.
Don't worry, I screwed up 2 or 3 this morning.
Okay.
You're in good company with Gareth
great.
today.
So we can mix idioms to our heart's content. Brilliant. There's another one. So the ANC is now seriously losing electoral support on the basis of its on performance of government. Before, I don't think performance in government was an electoral issue for most South Africans. They voted for the ANC for other sorts of reasons. But I think, and what this means within the ANC itself, there are many people, including the Minister of Finance, by the way, you were mentioning. I was recently this weekend at the Kgalemo Motlanthe Foundation conference in the Drakensberg, which brings together quite an impressive crowd of people.
Yeah.
Many linked or have historic links to the ANC. And the overriding message was underpinning so many of South Africa's problems are problems of government. So the message is getting home in key circles. And I think even within the African National Congress, which means within the ANC itself, there are unambiguously, there are some people in the ANC who are realizing that in order for the ANC to survive going forward, even in this election, they need to start fixing government. And what this means is even within the ANC, there is an openness for the first time in a long time to questions of policy. So I think it's possible if we are able to succeed in getting this on the agenda politically, that we could get this through.
But I'm still a little skeptical. And it's not just the ANC that I'm worried about, right? It is also all of the other smaller guys that are waiting in the wings, as it were. And I think one of the biggest threats that a lot of people kind of look at, and it's one of the parties and their particular line that they are pushing, is really the EFF and their view on how getting into government, what that means for them. And I use what we've been watching with the local sphere, right? So in the metros, if you look at what's happened in the past couple of days in eThekwini, right? They are not willing to let go of that kind of power because they are just waiting for their chance to be in that kind of power.
And how about, you mentioned Busisiwe Mkhwebane earlier? I mean, by appointing her as quickly as she was gotten rid of as public protector, they've also shown that they are absolutely in favor of keeping bad people in. That's certainly on their agenda.
So I think there's a huge part of our political culture which is quite hostile to the idea that the public administration must be autonomous. We're not talking about independent or neutral. We're talking about just autonomous. In other words, that they're not governed or controlled by politicians directly, that you allow some degree of professionalism into the public service.
It's anathema.
That's really the kind of,
that's
really
anathema to them.
So, and some of it is not just personal. There's some parties which have an attachment to a certain Marxism-Leninism, for example. Marx and Lenin were hostile to this idea of an autonomous public service.
Yes,
they believe that this was a way in which
they're looking to push a party line. They're saying our party's policies are X, and we want everybody in the public service to push the party line.
Absolutely. And they believe, I think completely incorrectly, that is the best way of pursuing the party line. It's fine for parties to have party lines. That's what parties do. They have their lines. That's what they're supposed to have. But whether every public servant should then be a party activist, That's the nub of the problem, and this is how we've been construing it in South Africa. What you need to accept is that you can have the best way to implement your party's policies is by having an administration which is not a party linked, that is best able to interpret your policies and then find the best way to implement them. Ironically enough, it's by not having your party people inside the administration that is probably the best way of having your policies implemented.
But
So it requires a mind shift.
You also talk about our political culture here in South Africa. If you consider that the political culture here in South Africa has been really starting in 94 about the fact that this party comes into power to change policy because for whatever, so they, at the time, the ANC comes in and says a better life for all, right? So we want to come in, we want to change policy for a better life for all. And their fear is that in the public service, if they don't have their people, they're going to get pushback in terms of changing all of these things to make sure that there's a better life for all. If you think about the EFF, they're about land and jobs for everyone. And their fear is that if they come in and they have ANC people, they're going to get pushback and they're not going to get their policies.
Yeah, I think that's great, but I think that it was a little bit, the situation was slightly more mixed in the transition. So on the one hand, I think overwhelming, that's why we got the Public Service Act, where the ANC were very nervous of, there'd been these, what do they call them? The settlement of the transition, which allowed for existing civil servants to keep their jobs, the sunset clauses. And the ANC was very nervous that these apartheid era public servants, or Bantustan public servants as well, were not in a position, would be hostile or would resist the implementation of ANC policies. And they thought the way to deal with that was, they couldn't fire them because of the sunset clauses, was to be able to appoint their own people into key positions. Made sense at the time. So I think that was the logic that informed the politicization. So, but at the very same time, there were key parts of the state, like, for example, the National Treasury, where what you saw was increasingly meritocratic autonomous administrations. This is, I think, one of the great achievements of Trevor Manuel, was to start realizing that first of all, the ANC just didn't have enough people in its own ranks to staff all the administrations, that you needed to start relying on non-ANC people. And the way to rely on them was to make sure that these were skilled, experienced people. So what you started seeing in some departments under ANC control, the professionalization of these administrations. And it's those professional administrations that have really carried us. I mean, what was at the heart of resisting state capture? It was the National Treasury. And who was it there? It wasn't just, yes, some of them were political ANC cadres, but it was also professional administrators standing up for professional standards in the way in which you operated. And that's really what was at the backbone of the resistance against the state capture against state capture. This is my analysis of what Jacob Zuma was. Jacob Zuma was fundamentally threatened by this tendency towards professionalization and a desire to keep direct party political control of administration so that he could manipulate things the way he wanted. And this is what we saw in South Africa, which is the great tragedy. An emerging professionalization through the 1990s into the early 2000s, a modernization, if you like, of the South African state. A very, very uneven, let's not go too far, but definitely a tendency in that direction, stamped out in under Jacob Zuma in the state capture years, and we have not recovered from that.
Okay, well, that's the important follow-up. Sorry, I just want to point out, no improvements since then.
But we also, I mean, I don't know if Treasury, right, is actually the place where we can. I agree with you that there were professionals in all sorts of places, and we saw this with the people that came and testified at state capture, who were steadfast, holding the line, as it were, against all of the state capture, right? But, I think when we think about Treasury and kind of the genius of Trevor Manuel, we also have to look at the fact that the genius of Trevor Manuel is really, we are now at the back end of that genius, where we have the most unequal society in the world, the genius of Trevor Manuel. But also, I'm interested to know, Trevor.
I think you could lay that at his feet. Can you?
Yeah, I think that's a little harsh. We can blame him for many things, but I think the history of inequality, I think that's
Jacob Zuma for state capture.
No,
Let's pick one guy.
no, but this is why I made the point that it hasn't improved since we got rid of Jacob Zuma, and it's been a sizable amount of time since then.
But
Nothing has got better under Cyril Ramaphosa in terms of professionalism of the public service, if that's our window on South Africa.
Or a change or a stop to the
Well,
state capture.
Yeah. What has happened, though, is that he seems to have given some space to people like Mashuphi Masiramule, who's in the NDP, a very talented academic, Busani Mhaweni at the National School of Government, to start pioneering some of these reforms.
These are slim pickings.
Yeah, it's simply, but they're there. And so what you have is this bill in Parliament. You also have what they call the professionalization framework, which is an attempt to say there's I realize as I say this, you'll start looking at me, you realize just how strange the person I am who's in your studio, because one of the great achievements in public service reform globally is the introduction of an entrance exam into the public service. It's one of the kind of absolute minimum standards of modernizing the state. South Africa doesn't have one. The professionalization framework proposes introducing one of the very, very low bar, but nonetheless a minimum.
We'll take what we can get.
minimum test. It's pretty important stuff.
And Busani gets to set the test.
Yes, Busani literally, National School of Government would set the test. Nonetheless, these sound like crazy nothings, but they're actually huge things in the global scheme of things. When you're talking about how states emerge, how states modernize, these really are important. These are important things.
Ivor, you made an example with America in the 20s and that they had and pushed this reform. I'm very interested to know what the changeover was like for them and how they got that right.
So the American political system is the system is more politicized than, say, the British or the French system. But essentially what they start to do is they start professionalizing a core component of their civil service. In other words, that for certain categories of employment in the American civil service, you need to come through. Various schools of administration. You need to have passed this entrance exam, and you need to come up through government, through government departments, through the civil service itself. You can't just arrive from the outside and take leadership of an entity. So what you start having from the 1920s in particular is the growing professionalization of the American civil service. That you can't just have political appointments in key positions in government administrations, which is what we currently have. And what you start having through the 1920s associated with America becoming a major superpower is the development of America's civil service and professionalizing the civil service so that it can undertake huge kinds of the New Deal, for example, building of dams, the development of its military is strongly linked to these reforms. But growth of the capability of the state in many areas are strongly linked to the breaking of the Tammany Hall system. It's the same in the UK in the end of the 19th century. France, at the end of the Second World War. France is broken at the end of the Second World War. They introduce all these reforms. They bureaucratized the system. They introduced the École Nationale d'Administration, which is the National School of Government, essentially. They introduced the system where, in order to enter the public service, you have to have gone through the National School of Government, the ENA. They professionalized their administration.
Every time you say National School of Government, I'm just thinking, and I know you like held up Busani as one of your beacons, but I'm just thinking, he is also dyed in the wool. His blood is black, green, and gold. And he gets to set the test. What about like DA people that come and write the test that he set?
Yeah, I mean, they're probably going to be referring to...
It's open for abuse.
And they're probably going to be referring to China as the ideal model here. Right? We know that this is increasingly what they're trying to do. Say, look at how well China runs on this terrible ideology. But of course,
this man idolizes China.
I would agree. I would say that there needs to be... I think China is definitely the model in his mind. Party control.
It's the only one.
So, as I've said, there are several pieces to the puzzle here. His is one piece of the puzzle. But if you take his piece of the puzzle with the proposed changes from the public amendment to the Public Service Amendment Bill, then you've got removing the discretion of politicians in the appointment process and in operational decisions. That's pretty important. You've also got then through Brusani's proposed reforms, increasing professionalization of people, improving their skills and selection on the basis of merit. That's the second piece. The third piece is the accountability of public servants, which is not there currently, but which we can talk about. And there's been a real stuff up in the organization of government, especially since the mid-1990s, which we can discuss. But what I'm saying is that currently on the table, which no one knows about, there are two pieces of the puzzle. Two important pieces of the puzzle. Can they be better? Absolutely. Can the puzzle be bigger, more complex?
Sure, let's not get stuck there.
Can the colors of it
We've
be
got to
better?
start somewhere.
Absolutely. But these
You've
are
got to
big.
start somewhere. I
These
get
are
that.
important pieces of the puzzle.
Wow.
No one knows about them. We need to support them.
Whose job is it to make people know about this? You know, you were talking about think tanks, talking about civic participation. Whose job is it to get people to know about it? People aren't in libraries digging up this kind of shit.
No, I think this is what I think what you guys are doing is great. I mean, I think it is the work of journalists. I think the journalists should be finding out the stuff and
Please, they're
and-
too busy
and one of
reporting on
the
Dr.
biggest-
Matthew on news.
One of the
Newsroom
biggest
Africa.
media houses is busy with VSPs as we speak. Some senior journalists taking out their pensions and walking away. The
Right.
newsroom in South Africa is
Right.
the
Hollowed
bottom
out.
of the barrel.
So that's why the kind of work that I do, I think, is important. We're kind of a piece of the cog to share, because all of the stuff is incredibly technical. Sometimes it's really, really technical. So
All
to
right.
share, to make technical stuff digestible, understandable in a more public forum, which I hope I'm doing, by the way.
No, you are. Listen, and I do think the work that you're doing is massively important. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had you here in the first place. The problem is to try and make this stuff easy to understand. And I don't mean, let me not make any bones about this. We have to dumb everything down to the nth degree because we've realized people don't even understand in basic civic terms the need to vote, how government works, what the differences are between the branches of government, for God's sake. People know nothing about this stuff. So when we get into complicated things like public service administration, and I know that there are people studying this at university, but often those people come out of the universities without any real understanding of how it should be applied. Because again, it's theoretical based on systems that aren't actually in practical use anywhere in the world today.
Okay, let me give you an example which Brusani uses. No,
Go on.
let's take it to you have a car.
Yeah.
Do you drive a car?
Yeah.
Okay. How did you get to drive a car? What do you know anything about cars?
A lot, actually.
Do you?
Yeah, I'm
Okay,
a
let me
little
use
bit of
me
a
as an
geek. I'm a
example.
bad example. I'm a bit of a geek.
Gareth, do you know anything about cars?
No,
Okay, but you drive one.
not enough. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so you're the politician. You drive the car.
Yeah.
Driving the car is like setting the policy, the direction of the car.
Sure.
Okay, so you want to
It's more about where you're going than the vehicle.
Okay. Do you know anything about how engines work or changing a tire or anything like that?
I could not fix it if it was broken,
But you know how it works.
more or less.
Okay, maybe
internal
we should,
combustion.
Maybe we
Let's
should use
use
me as an
you.
example.
Let's
then.
use you.
I can drive a car.
Okay.
You can't change your
I
tire.
think I could probably find the lever to open the bonnet if I have to.
Fair enough.
And that's where my skills end. What we've currently got now is people like me who can set policy, direction of the car, who are also charged and play a huge role in selecting the people that must fix the car. Not only selecting the people that must fix the car, but that must also decide what to fix and how to do it and what tools they must use. That is currently the situation which we currently have.
I think you give them too much credit. because because
That's credit. Wow.
I actually no, that's the sad reality. And feel free to climb in here, Pums, if you disagree with me, or anyone in the comment section. But I think we've actually got people who are not
Who don't know how
licensed
to
to drive the car, who have stolen the car, who leave the car burning on the side. And we see this in South Africa. We're the only country that I've been to in a long time, and I've traveled fairly widely, where you see abandoned cars on the sides of national highways with no driver anywhere to be found, that have run out into the fields because they're so completely confused about what to do with the car. Because maybe the lights are gone on, looks like it's going to explode. Who knows?
Okay.
That's I think you would be
ESCOM looks
fantastically welcome.
ESCOM looks a little bit like that. Transnet definitely looks like that. I think a lot of our SOEs look like that. Not everywhere looks like that, but yeah. Yeah, so it's a mixture. But
So
that is
do
the
we
general.
need? Okay, so
yeah.
do we need more Ivors who can choose the direction and the destination, or do we need more people who can actually fix the internal combustion engine, or do we need people who can just maintain the internal combustion engine?
So I think, strangely enough, we've got quite a good our political system, our democracy is actually working quite well. We have the declining, the sort of coming to the end of a sort of a one-party dominant system. ANC's, our political system is becoming more competitive, unambiguously. There are even polls which seem to suggest that a coalition government at a national level is possible. At least it's an argument which we begin to have.
It's going to come anyway. We just got to get ready for it.
Yeah, it's coming. It looks like the ANC could well lose Gauteng and KwaZulu in 2024, which means 3 provinces will be out of their control. So, in terms of deciding who are the drivers of the car, I think our country is working fairly well.
Can I show you what the car looks like, by the way? Show him this, Phumi. There's the car.
Let me see the car. Let me see the car.
That's the car that we...
You know what you have done?
That's a lot better than the car you described earlier, burning and crashed on the side of the road. That car has got wheels, and I like that car.
You have sent Gareth down a rabbit hole.
Sorry.
But okay, Gareth, stop distracting Ivor.
I'm sorry.
He's easily distracted, Ivor. So stop distracting Ivor. You were saying we surprisingly have enough of the right kind of people choosing the car?
Well, listen, this is democracy is a messy thing.
Like sausage making.
I've never made sausages, but I'll take your word for it. In a democracy, the people that drive the car are the people we choose as voters. We've got an increasingly competitive, robust electoral system. We don't have people saying we don't believe in democracy at that level so much. We have it's the people. The process for selecting the driver of the car, I think, is working in South Africa. The issue, though, is your guys around the rules as to who opens the bonnet and who gets to muddle around in the engine. There we have the current rules, which says the drivers are the guys that get to open the bonnet and mess around in the engine. Those rules have to change. And one of those rules is currently before Parliament. It's the amendment to the Public Service Act. Great. We've also got another rule, which says not only must the politicians not get to decide who muddles around in the engine, but now that's starting to say, well, let's get some professionals to muddle around in the engine. Let's get mechanics.
Yes.
Let's get people that can plug cars into computers and do the diagnostics and work out.
Which, again, I hate to say, but this comes back to my point initially about merit. Because at the foundational level, you've got either a belief in merit, like a mechanic has to know how to fix an engine, or you have the ANC's ideological approach, which is that anyone could fix the engine. It's just a question of the systems that have delivered certain people with the rights and privileges to fix the engine and other things which have not. Because that's what they genuinely believe.
I think there has been a sense for a long time that actually skills not really such a big deal. There was a very good piece of work done, it's a long time ago now, on nurses in Baragwanath Hospital. And the expression that was used was that they were ambivalent to skill. Why? Because during the apartheid period, the apartheid hospital system and general educational system used skill as a kind of stick to beat black nurses.
Right.
You could never be as skilled as a white nurse. So it produced
It's the same thing that happened to teachers.
Exactly. Same as in teachers, in policing across the South African, across the board. Black professionals were always regarded, black professional, how laughable, how ridiculous, what a crazy idea.
Because it was openly racist. And
complete racism. You could, let them muddle around on a couple of things, but the real professionals, of course, were always white. And the argument went that what this produced was an ambivalence to skill.
And that would have reinforced with white people the idea that black people are incompetent too. So it would have built resentments on both sides.
Absolutely. So
cool.
This question of skill has a difficult political history. So when you invoke merit all the time, I think for a long time people heard this was a kind of a racist language for excluding black people.
Sure. But now, after some 30 years, have we made any progress there? Because if we don't make progress there, then how can we possibly make progress in finding the mechanics for the car?
So we've unambiguously made progress in that regard, because if you look at the professionalization framework, it's got a long, crazy name, which it's called the professionalization of the public sector.
Don't even worry about it.
It says unambiguously, the purpose of the professionalization framework is to select public servants on the basis of merit, to introduce a meritocratic public service. So
That's
the argument there's been one. The word's there.
Okay.
It also talks about professionalizing and depoliticizing, if I remember
That
correctly.
would be
So at
fantastic.
the language, at the level of language,
Yeah.
that argument's been won. The framework was approved by cabinet in 2021. No, it was emerged in 2021 and was approved by cabinet in September 2022.
Okay.
So the language is formally part of our political language. So
Is this a
So we're back to the issue of implementation.
so now we have to and the way we get it implemented is by having these sorts of conversations, so that people in their homes, when you're thinking about South Africa, let's have these sorts of conversations. Is the municipality, are they appointing, how many engineers have they got in their water department or their electricity? Let's ask those sorts of questions. Let's ask the practical questions. Honestly, how many engineers in the Joburg municipality or in
well?
I'd just like to know town planners.
Town
Like
planners.
who approves
guys-
that like
exactly
mess that's out
So
So
there?
these are the
yesterday-
kinds of questions. Who are the people that are fixing our roads or not fixing our roads?
Well, we know who they are, because if you watched yesterday's news, there was a segment on water. You're about to be switched off if you're in Johannesburg again, because they have very, very low levels of water in our reservoirs, which is an engineering problem which can be solved by engineers. This is something which practical scientific people can do. Doesn't require any policy wonks at all. It's just making sure that the reservoirs are full. Now, if you looked at the meeting that was being held, that they showed on TV, on Zoom, you could see who was in the meeting. There were like 30 people there. I guarantee you maybe one or two of them were engineers and the rest were all placeholders who were being paid money to sit there. Who knows what they do? I can pretty much be sure, and this is why I'm not afraid to say it here, that most of those people have no idea why they're there.
So what I've also heard in this conversation, slightly, and I'm sorry, Gareth, but I do have to bring the Dr. Matthew Lani story back to the table,
Go on.
is because what that story is also about is about the countless number of people who have been revealed to be lying about what their qualifications are. You know, I think about the guy who was the former CEO of the JRA, for instance, who also, so the words are there, the implementation and the professionalization, the words are there, but people have bogus certificates. And because of I'm willing to pay you a little extra, I'll pay you 10% of my salary for the next 5 years. If you in HR get me into this job, wara, 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 wara. You know, there's all of these things. What I'm also hearing in this conversation, which you haven't said explicitly, Ivor, is that we also have a situation in our country that requires more people to be willing to be that last line, more people to be willing to be professionals. So if you're in the job already, if you are a teacher, if you are a nurse, if you are an HR professional, it's for you to be a good South African citizen and put the country first before yourself and your pocket.
So this is what Professor Masira Mule is constantly on about, around professionalization as a certain kind of value, a certain commitment to job, etc., etc. There's a third piece, though. This is where, if you can bear my stories, I'll tell you another story. It's the third piece. So what I've said to you now is that there are two pieces of the puzzle that are on the table. Now, there's a mixed metaphor for you.
They're
So-
not in place, but they're on the table.
They're on the table, exactly. No, I like that. You've saved my metaphor. You've saved my metaphor. Thank you so much. That's very. That's. I
I'm
need
also
you.
very good at puzzling.
Wow, enormous, amazing skills. So as I've said, we've got this amendment to the Public Service Act, which would take the powers of politicians, or reduce the discretion of politicians in key areas. That's great.
If it goes through.
If it goes
sure.
through. We've got a professionalization framework, which does a couple of good things for improving merit.
Sure.
Merit selection in
And the
public service.
language is
If it's-
good. We
if
approve
it's-
of that.
If it's implemented.
Mhm.
Okay,
Sure.
so we've got two pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah.
The third piece of the puzzle is what you're talking about, is accountability. Is
Ah.
around.
Right.
So here's an interesting story. Again, kind of story which no one in South Africa has heard, perhaps, or thinks about.
Go on.
We have something called the Public Service Commission. Does that name ring
Yes.
a bell? Public Service Commission. Ever
Yes.
heard of it?
Yes.
Okay, Public Service Commission is a feature of the sort of British system. All the Commonwealth countries have Public Service Commissions or Civil Service Commissions. And essentially, from the 1970s, the Public Service Commission in South Africa functioned as a big kind of central HR department. So if you applied for a job, the Public Service Commission vetted your application. It checked your CV. It did all that kind of vetting, or did all that kind of checking, and even from the 1970s, its power even went further. It would actually very strongly suggest who the appointee should be. It exercised had a very strong power in this regard. In 1997, we abolished the powers of the Public Service Commission. We took them away. It was in line with this kind of new happy theory of management that actually all those decisions should go back to senior officials inside the departments.
McKinsey and Bain.
It's not them in particular, but it's that new ethos of management. We don't want bureaucrats in our departments. We want managers. Managers need to have discretion. So even though you tied managers' hands behind their backs because actually the real power lay with politicians, ostensibly you gave them autonomy to make decisions, and therefore you didn't, and especially around recruitment. It was we had this fundamental contradiction in the structure of our public service. On the one hand, we give from the Public Finance Management Act of 1999, we give senior officials huge discretion over financial decisions, and ostensibly decisions around who to appoint and how to structure departments. But actually, we tie their hands behind their backs because it's actually the politicians that have those powers, and it creates this fundamental contradiction in departments and often huge conflicts inside departments over the exercise of those departments.
As a result, the same thing we have in the private sector, where you have people who are paralyzed with indecision because they're so terrified they're going to be shat on that they'd rather do nothing than do something. And so you have no action at all.
So there's the big issue. It's not so much incompetence, it's that no decisions get made. So we completely lament the lack of implementation. It's because everybody's terrified to make decisions because actually no one knows who's got the power to make decisions. So there's this constant, our departments, I don't think you understand, our departments are battlefields over who's got what powers. So the third piece of the puzzle we're suggesting is to return to the Public Service Commission its historical powers to vet appointments.
Like the Judicial Services Commission does in the judiciary.
Back to politicians.
That's maybe not a great example, but
not a good example by any stretch of the imagination, but better than the president just willy-nilly deciding.
Absolutely.
Right.
So the idea would be that the Public Service Commission constituted as an independent body protected from the ability for politicians to capture it, as an independent agent to vet appointments, to say, okay, so this is what your CV says. Let's check whether these actually. You say you've got a PhD in engineering. Remember PRASA. Remember our trains.
Man.
Do you have a PhD in engineering? Well, actually, it turns out you've got a matric.
Also, he was a doctor. That guy. He also was telling people he's a doctor.
Yeah. So,
well, you know why this is happening, right? This came out in the Dr. Matthew discussion too. The reason people are lying about being doctors and professors is because also we're a society that puts an enormous amount of weight on credentialism as opposed to actual practical experience and results. We're not actually interested in results in this country. We're just interested in the piece of paper that says you're qualified for X, Y, or Z. And a lot of our universities make it very easy for bullshitters to make themselves available to this system and then to advance their own personal careers post having that qualification or that credential.
Yeah, so we think that that this is the third piece of the puzzle that needs to be put in place. It's not in place currently. There's a proposal to to change the Public Service Commission Act, but I don't think it goes in the right direction. It goes far enough in the right direction. So I think the two pieces of the puzzle are in place. We need this third piece of the puzzle
so
as well.
Where are we in this long and snaking road? As well, because we know that policies and acts and white papers and green papers and blue papers and
bills,
it can also wind. It's a long and winding road that can take 10 years.
It can take forever. It can take forever if we, the general public in South Africa, don't understand the importance of these issues, and we don't mobilize to support them. Then they will never happen. But if we do, then there's a better chance they were happening. If we're reporting them in the media, if civil society organizations are taking it up in their activism, if we're asking questions in Parliament, if we're asking political parties, guys, great, love your stuff on economic policy, whatever it might be.
I mean, I'd love to see that. Wouldn't you
but
love
let's
to
see what is your policy on public service reform? Excuse me.
So are we asking all our listeners today, all of the 500 people here live listening to us today, and all of the individuals who download this podcast and listen to it later, to call their public representative and say, hey, you, Mr.
What-
So-and-so.
Exactly. Exactly.
Wouldn't you love it? I mean, wouldn't it just be the most beautiful thing in the world, Ivor? If someone had to stand up at one of these rallies where these politicians are allowed to just talk and never answer anything, say to them, hey, what do you think of the Public Services Amendment Bill? What do you actually believe the positive and negative consequences of that bill being passed as an act might have on the public service? And they'll all stand there, whether it's Julius Malema, Cyril Ramaphosa, John Steenhuisen. They'll all stand there with a mouthful of teeth, because I guarantee you they're not briefed on this. They're briefed in rhetoric.
So
challenge them.
Wouldn't
Ask them.
So if one of the consequences of this program and this podcast is precisely what you're suggesting, people phoning up their reps or political meetings saying, hey guys, we know the professionalization framework, what's your position on it? Can you explain the professionalization framework to me? What's the party's position on? What a breakthrough. That would be like an incredible breakthrough. What's your position on the public service? Yeah.
Plus, I have to say, it would also show you very quickly that your politicians are as shallow as can possibly be, because they probably won't have an answer. But at least then you know what you're voting for if you vote for them.
Well, it also might push them to go and find out.
Yes,
So-
we hope. We live in eternal hope.
Listen, you don't be, I got invited to Action, I shouldn't, maybe I'm,
No,
You're
go on.
allowed to.
Action SA had a policy conference, and they invited me to come and address their members.
Was
You
it
know.
fantastic?
Exciting beyond.
I tell you one thing, they had the visuals were good. It was all in green. It was pretty spectacular. Funnily enough, I'll tell you another funny thing. When we did the Betrayal of the Promise report, which was pretty wild stuff, the Communist Party invited me to present it to their 53rd National Convention, which was held in Benoni in the same venue as Action SA was having their manifesto launch. So it was like 5-6 years later.
Oh, wow.
When I presented to the Communist Party, this was in 2018, and 2017, just after we had published the report, there were, I don't know how many thousand delegates. They were very, very quiet. And when they learnt the details of what we had found around ESCOM, etc., you could hear the gasps, absolute gasps. And after that, the Communist Party broke essentially with the ANC.
So these things bring about actual
You say
change.
that I was actually, when we were talking about Dr. Blayton Zimande a little bit earlier, because he used to be the general secretary. I just looked him up, and one of the things that stood out for me is that it says under party, it says he is an ANC member, and I had a moment to kind of double take that. And apparently, since 2022 is when he gave up that
Communist Party.
Communist Party. That's what it says on Wikipedia.
Okay. Well, I mean, the Communist Party had been quite central in the support of Zuma in the early days, but they played a big part. They were a big part of the kind of turning against Zuma. They turned very strongly against him. I remember at that Congress, there was a Minister of Trade and Industry, I think it was, Rob Davies, sitting down at the table. He was so angry because they had been working on a locomotives deal to have locomotives locally manufactured. And what had the state capture guys done? They'd done this deal with the Chinese, and it had completely undermined all their localization efforts. He was absolutely livid. When we presented that report, people were blown away by what was going on. They were using the language of radical economic transformation, etc. But the actual content of it was the complete demolition of key state institutions like ESCOM, and the scale of looting was just incredible. So
I'm glad to hear it. I mean,
Yeah, because we've been talking a lot about the US. A friend of mine's just sent me a WhatsApp about the fact that the first time the Civil Service Commission was actually passed in Congress, the initial legislation passed in Congress in America was by Ulysses Grant, that president. A lot of people don't know that name. In
wait, so
1871.
after Lincoln, he was president.
In 1871. It's interesting that it took them up until the 20s to get that right.
So the Pendleton Act is in that period, but the stuff, it takes a long time for implementation.
Can I turn away from your area of specialization here and just ask you guys about a very important story that was in the news yesterday? And don't look at me like that, Phumi. There's a deal that's been done with the police and Virgin Active and Planet Fitness.
Hey,
Hold on. I just want to point out
all
this is
these years after stomach in and chest out,
All
they
these years
finally
later.
have gym memberships.
so they're giving the police a 20% rebate, essentially, if you want to join a Virgin Active or a Planet Fitness. So hopefully we all see lots more police in our gyms.
You know what I
would
wondered
welcome
about
that with open arms.
What I wondered about that is who's getting this? Who's paying for that gym membership?
No, so you will still have to pay. I don't know if it's the police who pay or
The
the
police
individual
person,
police
the sa-
person, but they will get 20% off, which I'm very happy with. Whether I'm a gym user, I'm with one of those two big gyms. Don't mind. I'd like to see more police there, wouldn't you, Ivor? Isn't that just great news?
I think this is to the point that Ivor was making, that sometimes these things take years to put into implementation. All these many years. Do you remember when Biggie Cele first said that stomach in, chest out?
1883 to the 1920s, it's 40 years.
Yeah.
In the broad span of history, it's not that long.
40 years.
We're in a democracy for 30 years. We're at this point which has taken the US 200 years to get to, and then 40 years to implement, to begin implementing. We're at that point after only 30 years of democracy. I think we shouldn't be so hard on ourselves. That's quite impressive.
Except, look, in one aspect, it is impressive, but I do hope it doesn't take us 40 years to implement, because our country cannot take that. But this is the thing, though, about prior learning and experience, is we do not have to make the same mistakes that the oldest democracy in the world has made. We can definitely learn from those past mistakes and just fix it from the get-go.
Hallelujah. And I think so. This is where I think this overcoming the parochialism of South Africa's conversation is so important. Learning from the rest of the world, opening up that Africa's got important experiences to share with us. Other parts of the world have got important experiences to share with us. Learning. This is why I think it's so important for us to open our eyes and to look around us. And I think that's what we haven't been doing. Is that we have a tremendous tendency to think, look internally only for solutions.
Well, I'm very glad you were here with us today, and thank you. I hope you got to detail at least a proportion of the things that you're doing, because I think these are valuable discussions, and I do wish people would go to political meetings and ask the questions that you're asking and that you're telling us to ask this morning, because how else are we going to make things better? We're not going to do it by shouting stupid slogans about land and nationalization or race politics, because if we haven't evolved beyond that to the next level of questioning, we're always going to end up with the quality of leaders that we've currently got, and they'll never be challenged to answer bigger or more exciting questions than that, right?
Absolutely, man. I think this is about lifting the quality of discussion in South Africa. Let's get into the details. And when you look at the details, then you start seeing that actually there are ways through the gloom. There are ways through the despair. And this is what I think the great opportunities are. So go out there, ask your member of parliament, speak up political parties, ask these sorts of questions. What do they think about the Public Service Amendment Bill? Are they supporting it? What do they think about the professionalization framework? What do they think about the reform proposals around the Public Service Commission? What do they think about the public administration questions in the police, in health, etc., etc.? Ask those questions, people. Those are the questions to ask.
Just after liking and subscribing. Just after liking and
do
subscribing.
That as well.
Phone your public representative and ask them all of these questions.
All right. Thank you very much to Ivor Chipkin. Thank you very much to Phumi Mashiko. And most importantly, thank you to you. You can join us tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. You can always listen to this episode and all the other parts of the Burning Platform that you may have missed over the last couple of weeks. We try to bring you the most interesting thinkers we can find in the country, people who are doing the heavy lifting, in the case of so many of our guests, and also the politicians themselves. There are going to be a lot of those on the show as we head towards the election, whether you like it or not, right, Phumi?
Yay. I'm afraid we might have to ask Busani to join us one of these days.
Well, that might not be a bad idea. And he's welcome. He's welcome. And it won't be a hostile reception.
It never is.
That's my whole point, is that all these political actors are going to have an impact on our lives, so we would rather hear from them than not.
Well, Ivor, I told you when you walked in, I'm glad that it was this Ivor that walked in through this door today. And I'm not any less glad.
Well, thank you very much. And I'm very glad that after a segment on penis size and enlargement, we were able to have a meaningful conversation. That says that there's, you see, we're making public service, public administration interesting. Well, there we are. That's an achievement.
We can turn on a dime on this show.
That's
All right.
amazing. That's a skill.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. We will see you tomorrow. Be good. Have an excellent